Good rising, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. I am Tayla Andre. You're waking up with Tayla Andre, where the time of day matters not. Waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. Waking up with Tayla Andre is not about 5 a.m. or 7 a.m., but about waking up, understanding what's going on in your community, what's going on in your neighborhood, and understanding what goes on that directly affects you. Today we are speaking with, I want to say the DA, but we have to wait until we vote for her first. She candidate for District Attorney, Suffolk County. I love her already. I'm biased. I'm going to tell you guys up front. Rachael Rollins. Rollins.
Like Collins, but with an R.
Rollins. I don't want to take any time on me and how I feel. I definitely want your feedback, and we've been hearing some feedback so far, and just get right into it. So for those who don't know, what is District Attorney?
Excellent question. So the District Attorney is the highest ranking prosecutor in your county. So they are basically responsible for every charging decision, every criminal decision that happened within Suffolk County. That's what Dan Conley, who's the current District Attorney here, does. I need our audience to understand that there's also an Attorney General. Her name is Maura Healey. She's responsible for the state of Massachusetts and criminal and civil stuff. And for people watching, biggest difference between civil and criminal: civil, we take your money, but you don't go to jail. Criminal, we usually take your money and you go to jail, okay? So Maura Healey does the state, and then even arching over that, U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts. We have one in our state. Some bigger states have more than one, but we have one. His name's Andy Lelling, U.S. Attorney Lelling. We were colleagues when I worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office. He reports up to Jeff Sessions, who reports up to President Trump. Attorney General Maura Healey, pretty autonomous. She doesn't report up to anyone. She runs her own office of hundreds of Attorney General's office. Important for this conversation, Dan Conley doesn't report up to anyone. So his office of about 250 people, he runs that entire office. He makes decisions about who's charged with whether or not you get bail when you do go through the system, what sentence the Commonwealth is going to stand up and say, we are charging defendant Rollins with the following crimes, and would, Your Honor, we say this should be 15 years to 17 years, or usually it's set in months, so I can't do that math, but just whatever that is. So that's what the DA does, is they are primarily responsible for community safety and getting justice for victims. But unfortunately, there are some communities within Suffolk County that believe that the DA's office is over-prosecuting people in those communities. And in fact, Tayla, data show that Black and brown people make up about 17% of the population in Suffolk County. Boston, they make up about 50% of the people that are incarcerated. So those numbers show that there is what's called a disparate impact, or it is disproportionately impacting community. And that's why I'm really interested in this position and being the person that changes that.
So as DA, you would then report to nobody. Your office would be autonomous within yourself. You report to
the voters.
Conley reports to
the voters.
Dan Conley has not reported to voters.
Yeah, well, so that's a great point, Tayla, because Dan Conley back in 2002, under Governor Swift, if you guys remember Governor Jane Swift, there was a district attorney, Black district attorney in the history of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, was Ralph Martin. He was a Republican, but a Black man. He left the Suffolk County DA's office to go to a law firm called Bingham McCutcheon. I happened to be a baby lawyer at that law firm and ended up working with Ralph, not in the DA's office, but as a young lawyer at a firm called Bingham McCutcheon. But when District Attorney Martin left, it caused a vacancy in the position, and the governor was originally going to appoint a gentleman who happened to be unexpectedly very sad, and then she appointed Dan Conley, who I believe was sitting on the Boston City Council at the time. He had been a former assistant district attorney. So he ran as an incumbent, meaning he had the seat when he was on the ballot, and a lot of other people ended up running for that seat. Eddie Jenkins was one of them, who happens to be married to one of the candidates in our race right now, Linda Champion, or was married. Bill Sinnott, who ended up being Mayor Menino's corporate, so the lawyer for the city of Boston. Lots of different people were in that race. Dan Conley was the incumbent. When you're the incumbent, it's very easy for you to get in because on the ballot it says incumbent, and he won by a landslide, and that in 2000, I believe, in 2. And then he's had 3 separate election cycles. They're 4 years each, where nobody even stepped up and tried to challenge him. And we all know that our communities have been complaining about that have happened. Criminal charging decisions is what we call. And just for people watching, that literally means, what are you charged with? So what I want to make sure people understand watching the show, the police and the DA cannot operate without. So unless you are arrested and brought into court, there are some circumstances I won't bore you with, but like 99% of the time, unless you're arrested and brought into court, the DA's off stand up and charge you with anything. The police have to bring you there. Now, sometimes the DA's office has task forces, or they have, wires that they're doing massive investigations behind the scenes, that they work on what we normally call like larger takedowns where many people are arrested at once. But other times the police are driving by and happen to see something, and they might, or they get a 911 phone call and they show up and they might arrest somebody. Well, that person is brought to a precinct. It's determined whether or not they can be bailed or not, or they're brought to court, right?
Who makes that determination about bail?
So that's
once you are brought into that jailhouse, you're fingerprinted, you're taken. Who decides of bail at that moment or before a judge?
So usually what happens is if I, hopefully not, I leave here, I get arrested when I leave and it's 4 o'clock, they could arrest me, bring me to the station, I'm to see a judge today, or a clerk magistrate is in Massachusetts, the people that come and decide what the bail is, or you have to give the bail to them. There are other charges where you have to appear in front of a judge, say, or you happen to go to court, and you never appear in front of a judge without your own lawyer. So if you can't afford it, you get the initials are CPCS. It's the same word for a public defender. I think it's the committee for, I should know that, but I can't remember it right now. But it's a CPCF public defender if you can't afford it, or you stand up and you say, Your Honor, I'd like to retain my own counsel, if you can afford your own lawyer. But right then is where you are, what the charges are against you. And if you've ever watched Law & Order, for example, or unfortunately been in court yourself, usually it's an assistant district attorney that has just been handed the police report right then, or maybe before that time, to look through the file and see what all the police reports are for everything they're dealing with. And then they stand up and determine what the bail is.
At that moment.
Usually at that moment is when that happens. And
so let me ask you a question really quickly, because what I'm hearing, so there's a case that's currently in court, and it was a police officer who was driving drunk on
I'm aware.
On New Year's Eve. And he
the Uber driver, or
no, it was the police officer that was driving drunk. He was in the gang. They were drinking during New Year's Eve. He left, ended up hitting 2 young men. One of those young men is Jose Textera, who is currently still in the hospital, has received 4 surgeries, spleen, brain, like down the list. He's lucky he's still alive. That officer was able to be released on his own recognizances, no bail, no bond, no jail. Currently, suspended without pay. Was that?
You're sure it's without pay, or is it with pay?
It probably is with pay.
Because there's sometimes they can be, and remember, that's a union. Usually in their collective bargaining agreement, it determines based on what's are you suspended without pay? Are you suspended with pay? But go ahead, what's the question?
So with the driving drunk and being released on your own recognizances, was that Dan Conley's decision, or whose decision was that?
That was more than likely a decision where, and I would have to look at this, so I would not want to say this. There are instances, Tayla, where the Commonwealth stands up, an assistant district attorney, and says, Your Honor, looking at a judge, we believe that Defendant Rollins, the bail should be set at $30,000. And Defendant Rollins' attorney stands up and says, Your Honor, that's outrageous. She has ties to the community. She has a great job. She has no criminal record. All the things. There are 17 things that you look at to determine what bail decisions are made. Some of them are ridiculous and you shouldn't be considering them, but that's another story. If the judge is more persuaded by what the defense attorney said as opposed to what the Commonwealth said for Dan Conley's
current
group,
position,
then the judge gets to say, hits the little gavel, bail set at $0, right? I would not be comfortable, Tayla, saying Dan didn't ask for a high bail. It could be that the DA stood up and said $20,000, or it could be that the DA said the Commonwealth isn't asking for bail, Your Honor. Unless and until I saw that, I wouldn't feel comfortable disparaging, speaking on it or disparaging the DA's office if in fact they had asked for it and didn't get it. Because remember, ultimately, the judge is persuaded by what it is the Commonwealth says, because the judge just sits there and is supposed to be the ruler of fact and law. When a jury's there, when you finally get to a trial, the jury decides the issues of fact, the judge decides the issues of law. But when you're at a hearing in front of a judge, because you got to understand, lots of things happen before you get to trial, right? You have bail hearing, you can have a dangerousness hearing, which we can talk about later.
Is that like flight risk type?
Yeah, so what is interesting, Tayla, is a lot of the progressive candidates for DA, myself included, are saying no bail. And people on the other side might say, oh, you guys are crazy, you're soft on crime, people are going to be out here committing. Well, here's the point. If you are dangerous, let's say I get arrested, they say your bail is $50,000, or let's even say your bail is $1,000, and I don't have any money, like many people don't.
Khalif Broda is what?
Exactly. I mean, in Rikers, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, I can't get out. I have not been found guilty of anything yet. You are innocent until proven guilty, allegedly, in the criminal justice system. I'm brought into the Suffolk County House of Corrections to sit and await the next trial date. Either my lawyer argues for a reduced bail, right? But with some people, if the original bail is $50,000, Tayla, and it gets reduced down to 20 and then reduced down to 10, if you don't have any money, that's no different than me saying $1 billion or $1 million, $100,000. You know, it's crazy there. But what you got to understand is, if I'm dangerous, at the dangerousness hearing, I get kept, right? Like, you're going to catch me because I'm dangerous, or based on what I'm charged with, the DA's office can say, we're seeking a high bail, Your Honor, because the charges against Ms. Rollins are egregious. She's alleged to have done blah, 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 right? So what my point is, don't keep me in jail because I'm poor. Keep me in jail because I'm dangerous, right? Keep me in jail because I have 50 Rachael Rollins, 50 defaults, right? So I'm supposed to show up there and I don't. Because bail, honestly, Tayla, the way we need to start thinking about it, bail is, will you show up the next time we have court for you, right? That's really what
That's really all it is?
That's really all it is we're making sure up. So we're either holding your money, whoever bails you out, and I hope you've never had to do this. I unfortunately have in my life had to bail people out, but you show up, you give money, you get a little slip back. If they mess up, if they don't show up to the court, you lose your bail, right? There can be hearings about, whether you can try to get your bail back, but that's the general concept of how it works. And depending on whether you're in the federal system or whether you're in the state system, is it 100% asking for bail? Some other places it's just 10% of what they're asking. But those are the nuances. The big pictures that you guys need to be thinking about is, will Rachael show up to court again?
So let me ask you a question. When I pay bail, my bail is $100. When I pay bail, do I get that back, or does the court keep it, or is it kept?
So it's kept somewhere, and if
like escrow.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you're a real estate lawyer, or a realtor. I apologize. So it's kept, and then when the person shows up, you get your bail back, right? But you have to have that receipt, right? You have to show up and say, I bailed this person out. They showed up and did everything. I'd like my money back, right? Yeah. So again, I mean, I think what's interesting is we have sort of conflated those two things together of like, well, Rachel's in jail because she did something wrong, and obviously we have faith in the system, right? Or most people do. And we're not looking hard enough and realizing that, unfortunately, a lot of those decisions bring people that are just poor. And adding to that, Tayla, is that's before you even get in the system. We are arresting people that have mental health issues, right? We are arresting. So let's even think the big news that happened. It wasn't in Suffolk County, it was in Middlesex County, but the Harvard student that was obviously either, he was certainly in crisis,
yes.
right? Whether it was drug-induced crisis, whether it was a mental, irrespective of how he got there. I believe he was like either fully naked or, pretty much naked. And we are so desensitized in the United States now and in the criminal justice system that we aren't even looking at it as a big deal because he's alive, right? All he got was punched or, struck, assaulted 5 or 6 times, but he lived to tell the story. We're so used to people killed, right, by law enforcement. We are now getting completely desensitized to really objectionable behavior, right? Criminal behavior at times. And what is really frustrating, Tayla, and I know for your watchers and listeners, is the narrative is always, or too often, white murder suspect safely
captured,
right? So law enforcement can use their deliberation and their sort of thought process appropriately when it is somebody who's alleged to have, Tsarnaev, even though he's not a white person.
Bombed a city.
Right, bombed a city.
Killed a police officer and a dog.
Right, Dylan Roof, the other person that just, in Yarmouth, who executed a law enforcement officer and shot a dog, alive. And I get it, you're innocent until proven guilty. They are armed. They are armed as well, right? So we see armed, often white, murder, like multiple suspects safely detained by law enforcement. And then we see the juxtaposition of that is black and brown people law-abiding, irrespective of what their Corey says, what they're doing at that. When I look at you and you look at me, you don't know what my background is, right? If I'm running away in my grandparents' backyard, away from a police officer and gunned down, and we are left feeling like, are you me? Like,
yes.
it is exhausting. And so I think people see me oftentimes and say, she's so serious, or she's arrogant, or she talks about her background and things. It is so important that we get somebody in this that is qualified and competent and can make changes, right? So I am so pleasant and happy in my personal life, I promise you that. I know that people say, I want you to smile more and be happy. These serious issues that I don't get the liberty of smiling while I'm talking about it because it's a hobby for me. And there are some people that are in this race that get to take off their either Black Lives Matter t-shirt or whatever cloak they're putting on when they're at a rally and go back to their gated communities or where they live in wealth, away from the communities that are most impacted by these crimes and
by the system that they want to be a part of.
And I'm angry about it, right? Like I'm thoughtful, but it hurts me because I have family members that are affected by this, right? And so for me, it pains me when we see a system that we don't have any representation in, none. And we are the most often impacted by who makes the decision sitting in the DA's office.
So that's a great segue into my next question. There's nobody who looks like us in these positions. When you go to the courthouse, we're probably the security guards that scan you in. But outside of that,
interpreters. We're interpreters.
Yeah, the interpreters. But when it comes to, all right, so I've listened to 1,000 rap songs. The DA's trying to lock me down. DA's trying to lock me up. The DA got me some years. Curse word the DA. We are used to a system where, the good old boys, the, Conleys, the O'Ryans, O'Sheas, are in the position of putting us behind bars. what benefit do we have to have a black woman or a woman of color sitting in a seat putting more black and brown faces behind bars?
Right. So what I can tell you is that the listeners and watchers need to understand the DA's office is a prosecutor's office. So they prosecute people. I believe that you can prosecute people to keep the community safe and be smart on who you prosecute while you're being fair and equitable. So anyone using the system can be treated with respect, okay? I believe having somebody with my background, who I've been a prosecutor for 7 years, I've been a criminal defense attorney as well, but I also have a brother that's in Billerica right now. I'm the guardian of nieces due to the opioid crisis and mental health issues. So I am a user of the system, right? I have stood up in court and prosecuted people. I have stood up in court and defended people who are being prosecuted. And I have sat as a sibling crying as my brother was sentenced to serve a term. And I believe the system looked at him and judged him on his worst day, as opposed to oftentimes other people that get the mosaic of their entire life looked at before a decision is made there. And I think when you have people that have experiences that we have, right, that don't look at every defendant as just another number, but as somebody that could technically and literally be in their family. When you hear where they grew up with, you don't have to, or where they grew up on H Block, you're not saying, Google, what's H Block? You know, all right, which one? Which H Street off of Humboldt Ave was it? Where did they live? And by the way, not lives in H Block is in H Block, the gang, right? So there are hundreds of people living in thousands in that community that have no gang affiliation. But when we don't have anyone that looks like us or from those communities in the gang unit at the DA's office, everyone in H Block is potentially a member of H Block, the gang. So I feel like it's those lived experiences, Tayla, not learned. You read the new Jim Crow. I'm very proud of you. Mm-hmm. You play basketball with black people who you used to prosecute. Wonderful. That doesn't make you understand whole communities. And more importantly, I feel like we are so used to getting people that promise us things but have never delivered, right? And we believe them. Mm-hmm. But we demand of our own people at times, show me the receipts, mm-hmm. which I love, right? I will show you every receipt I have. And as you've noticed, interviewed by you on the radio, you asked me to come in today. I will meet with anyone. I will go anywhere. I will debate. I will forum, because I'm very, very confident. It's not cocky, but in my skills. And it is so important that we get in there who is going to advocate for the community to be involved in the system and is going to be transparent and say, hold me accountable. These are our numbers. And is going to say, I want to divert violent crimes out of the DA's office and into the services they need. But Tayla, there are going to be people, if they're shooting and killing in our communities deserve to be safe too. So for me, I want you to, all of us, every one of us, about our system, but I'm very proud of my track record and what I've done for the community.
I am Tayla Andre. You are tuned into the Wake Up with Tayla Andre. We are interviewing Rachael Rollins. I don't know why, it just rolls off my tongue. District Attorney, candidate for District Attorney of Suffolk County, Rachael Rollins. We'll be right back.
So they say it's a man's world? I don't see anybody's name on it.
While they were doing their thing, we slowly changed all that.
Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
Thank you. You got a king?
Go fish! In your face!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Good rising, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. I am Tayla Andre. Welcome back to the Wake Up with Tayla Andre show, where it has absolutely nothing to do with the time of day that we link up, but about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. We're here. We're oh Lord have mercy. I'm just going to give you the title.
Okay.
We're going to just give you the title. Candidate for District Attorney, Rachael Rollins. So one of the feedback, because I'm just here for the comments.
Yep.
One of the feedbacks that I've heard was, you know, she's not from Boston. Why does she care about Boston? This isn't her city. Go back from where you came. Where do you come from, and why is Boston so important?
Yeah, so great question. There are 5 people right now. 2 of us were born in Boston, right? So I was born in Boston. My parents are an interracial couple. They lived on Harlem Street in Dorchester, which many people unfortunately know about the triple homicide that happened on Harlem Street. It was obviously well before that. And Boston was not a particularly welcoming place for interracial couples and, very candidly, people of color generally at that point. So my parents decided to move away into Cambridge to start their family. And so my mom's the oldest of 11 children, and I have 10 aunts and uncles that lived in 10 aunts and uncles, all from the same 2 grandparents that lived in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. So I laugh whenever people say you're not from Boston because, okay, you're right. I grew up in Cambridge. I spent all of my time in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan. My parents, by the way, are Boston school teachers. So my dad retired 40 years in Boston Public Schools. So Brighton High School, South Boston High School, Latin Academy. My mom was a school nurse, Boston Public Schools for 20 years. So she was the school nurse at Charlestown High. She was at the school nurse at Boston Day and Evening Academy. That's Dudley, that's more, you know. So all over Boston, the 5 of us, their children, going in and out of all those schools, visiting our parents. My parents have 60 years in Boston that they gave their life and blood to this town and city. And, you know, I get it. But what I love about this comment, Tayla, is none of your people that are calling you are saying, I don't understand what she's saying. Like, she seems unintelligent, or she doesn't have any experience in this role, or she's not qualified for the position. It's the go-to, you're not from here. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, for me, I say back to them, okay, you're right. I grew up in Cambridge. It's not like I moved here from Kentucky ago and am now like, Google what's Boston. Like, this is, it's funny to me, but I will answer whatever question there is. And I chose to move to Roxbury. And what's interesting is the law requires day of the election, so September 4th, that you're a resident of Suffolk County.
Hold on. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Excuse my ignorance.
Yes.
So the day of the election
is when you have to be a resident.
You have to sign your lease to be.
I don't know it doesn't say lease, but when you go, and I encourage people to do this, when you go online at the Secretary of State's office. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
In order to be.
So I can live in Holyoke. I can live in, Newton, Wellesley.
And there are elected officials that we have loved in Boston that moved into the district to run for the job in the past. Absolutely. And what I'm saying to you is that if that sounds outrageous to you, and whether I agree with that, speak to your, Tayla, you're having an episode.
I really am.
Speak to your elected officials and have the rules changed. Absolutely. And so, for example, and I'll give you more. So for some seats, you only need 150 signatures certified, right? So signatures aren't just signatures. I'm out there and I'm saying, hi, are you a registered voter in Suffolk County? Yes. You need to sign your name right here and you need to write your address. I then take that sheet and I walk to the city of Chelsea and hand it in to the elections office. If they can't read your signature, I don't get counted for that. Or if you aren't registered to vote, if they can read your signature but you're not registered at that address, that signature doesn't count for me. You have to get 1,000 of those to be a district, to run attorney, 1,000 certified signatures. So I'm happy to say I got close to 3,000 and stopped. I'm on the ballot. I've already had all my signatures certified. I'm officially on the ballot, so that makes me very, very happy. And shout out to Black Female Excellence. I think Linda Champion is also the only other person, so that makes me happy. And what I can tell you, Tayla, is in this race, I supported Evandro as a state rep. Like, I know who Linda is. I don't know well, but I know Linda has worked in the Suffolk County DA's office. Whether my campaign thinks it's a good idea or not to say good things about them, I love that there are 3 qualified people of color speaking on panels about issues that affect us, period. Like, the people that are going to jail don't often look like Shannon and Greg, because they have the means to hire really good attorneys and get diverted out of the system and not in a diversion program. So for me, I love that people are hearing about Evandro and all the work that he's done, because he's done really good work. I love that people are seeing Linda and hearing that she's worked in the DA's office and, you know, was, I think, a professor and has done real estate work. I am so tired of opening the Globe and the Herald and seeing homicide here and our communities and people that look like us only being talked about in crisis and crime, you know, and death and destruction. We have beautiful and intelligent and thoughtful people in our communities too, and I'm really proud of the fact that Evandro, Linda, and I are going to get our communities excited in this race and involved and hopefully voting.
Absolutely. So you deaded the issue about not being from Boston, and if you had 10 aunts and uncles, that's where you spent your weekends, that's where you spent vacations, that's where you were all summer.
Right. Uncle Kevin, and by the way, all my uncles, Uncle Kevin, Madison Park, 35 years, worked for Madison High School, right? Right next to Reggie Lewis Center, lives on Dudley Street, and like owns properties all over the place, right? So for me, Uncle Brother lives in Dorchester. Uncle Robbie lives right across from
Is his name Brother?
Well, we called, so you're going to make fun of us. I have an Auntie Sissy and an Uncle Brother because my mom couldn't say
their names.
So she called her Sissy, and she couldn't say Joseph, so she called him Brother. So we unfortunately have an Auntie Sissy and an Uncle Brother. Like, don't make fun of our family.
No
no
worries.
I have an uncle that's a cowboy. Like, he lives right near, and I know everyone is going to see who he is, and I love him to death, even though
like
he
a real life cowboy.
Literally dresses like a cowboy. So I just laugh. And I shout out to Uncle Robbie. I love you very much. But my point is this. I have family all over the place in Boston, and I appreciate the passion and the people that are upset with me because I know they're passionate about another candidate, and that's why the hate, or it's not even hate. For me, if I can't look at you and answer, I shouldn't be running for DA. Like, do you know how many letters District Attorney Connolly gets a week telling him what a horrible job he's doing? Ivan at Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, who I love and worked with often, writes letters to him. If you don't have the backbone to stand up and be able to take criticism or be able to look at people in their worst moment and say, I'm so sorry, Miss Rollins, your son has been murdered, and we're going to do everything we can to find the people that did this to him, and you can't have those type of conversations, or it gets my, I'm incensed because somebody asked me where I live. I'm not qualified to do this job. I told you, I'll show up anywhere. I'll answer whatever question. You're going to be respectful. I mean, I'm a 47-year-old person who's worked very hard in my life to get to where I am. I believe we can disagree without being disagreeable. So
let me ask you this. Okay, let's take the knowledge that you have.
Yep.
And put that in civilian.
Sure.
You are Tayla Andre, the civilian, and you are seeing everything that is wrong with the knowledge that you have. What needs to be the step? Like, today is day 1, 100 days. What needs to be focused on?
Immediately, excellent question.
From like a civilian
absolutely,
standpoint.
from a civilian standpoint, when I am elected district attorney, it is literally a pitch black room with respect to what happens in the DA's office, right? Our community doesn't know what's happening. We have to oftentimes go to the Boston Police website in order to get crime statistic data there. And there should be data there. But the DA's office, we need to make it almost a community prosecution office, right? We have, I believe under my leadership, we are going to work way to involve the community in what our decisions are, right? So for example, I want to install at the very least, quarterly meetings where the DA is going into the communities, and whether it's Hibernian Hall, right, or it's Latin Academy, I mean, wherever you want to go, right, to report out what is happening, how many people we've arrested. I know that this is happening with the Boston Police Department, and I will give DA Conley a shout out. I've been to community Dorchester where I see the DA from the Dorchester District Court, right on Washington Street, meeting with those communities, talking about the crime that's happening in those neighborhoods. Local beat police officers showing up in specific associations. But we need to bring that up a level. We need the DA to show out and say, almost like a State of the Union, the way, or the State of the City, the way the mayor does. We need to report out and say, look, we're seeing an uptick in the crimes, but we've diverted away of the 35,000 cases. Let me repeat that. 35,000 cases a year that the DA's office handles. Whoever your DA is needs to have handled massive caseloads before. When I was Council of MassDOT and the T, I oversaw thousands of cases a year. Not 35,000, but thousands that I was responsible for as the lawyer to make sure all of them were handled there. But back to the point, I want to make sure I'm going out to the community, making them come to me, going out. It's going to be the same day, you know, whether it starts in January, April, whatever the 4 months are, right, apart, or 3 months apart, I'm sorry if it's quarterly, and reporting out to you. And then just time of reporting out is going to be community listening, right? What are we doing wrong? What are we doing well? What do we need to do differently? What is happening for you? I want to create a conviction integrity unit, right? We are so fortunate, Tayla, to in Boston, in Suffolk County, we have some of the best universities in the world. A man who's endorsed me, which I'm very excited about, Ron Sullivan, he's a professor at Harvard Law School. Many of us know him as one of the 2 lawyers that Aaron Hernandez in his double homicide, where he got acquittals or not guilties on both right before, unfortunately, the defendant took his life. And Ron Sullivan has created Conviction Integrity Unit in Cook County, Chicago. He's working with people in Brooklyn on doing that. I've already commissioned him to say, when we start here, we're going to do that. Because right now...
What role, I'm sorry to cut you off, what role does that play that right now we don't have a civil voice when it comes to police officers?
Absolutely.
Or what role can you play in making sure that...
a civilian role, right.
Yeah.
So right now the co-op board...
Or citizens, because we're not civilians.
Right. Well, community, right? So right now the Boston Police Department, which I will say we are co-joined twins, we work together all the time, but Commissioner Evans and Mayor Walsh decide who's on that co-op. Right now it's called a co-op. An executive order that Mayor Walsh signed that expanded it from 3 people to 5 people. I don't know if he's appointed anyone there yet. I can't speak on that. I will know that by the next time we speak. I do know the 3 people that currently sit on it now: former police officer who's now a lawyer, former or retired judge, and then an individual that's a member of the community. I have testified in front of the Boston City Council on behalf of the Boston branch of the EP for civilian review boards, meaning not just appointed people by the mayor.
Of course, because you're gonna watch your own back.
Right.
Like people who are from the community that have a strong voice in the community that need, demand, and should be heard by those that are policing or policying the community. Is there, if you become district attorney, do you have a say in that?
I absolutely do. I mean, I think ultimately the mayor and the commissioner decide who sits on that board. I get to decide whether we charge police officers with crimes when they are drunk driving and hit Mr. Textera, right? That is a decision exclusively in the role of the district attorney. I don't have to ask the mayor or the commissioner anything to do that. And whether we set bail for that person, because to me, you know, I fortunately think about this deep into the middle of the night. So police officers are always given
the benefit of the
doubt, but aren't held to a higher standard when it comes to taking someone's life, right? Like, so commit crimes, right? So they're given the benefit of the doubt, but for me, if you have taken an oath to protect and serve, when you commit a crime, I expect more of you.
Exactly.
Expect more of you.
Especially when you have training, especially when you have all of this knowledge that was, you sat in, I was going to say boot camp, but.
Right. Yeah, like when they went to, out in 2 minutes, but basic training or whatever, the training is they go to, the academy.
That's what it is.
Yes.
Aside from transparency, from a civilian standpoint, what else needs to be fixed? So let's say, God forbid, not Rachel, but it's somebody else.
Yep.
What needs to be fixed aside from, lack of transparency, lack of communication, lack of
what needs
community
to be fixed,
engagement?
What's really good, and I think, Representative Carvalho a lot about this, and he's right. The elected officials did a really good job of doing a criminal justice reform bill, which is sweeping changes, right? Mm-hmm. Mostly diversion and juvenile, but some certainly for the rest of us that are over juvenile age. Removing some mandatory minimums, but also creating some new ones. But what's fascinating to me is we have to implement changes, right? So I decided to bring something just so you could see. These are for judges, right? So when a decision in the new criminal justice reform bill, or there's a ruling from the Supreme Judicial Court in the Brangen case, which everyone's bored already, but basically the case was written by a fabulous judge, Geraldine Hines, first black woman ever to serve on the Supreme Court of Massachusetts, also endorsing me, which I'm very excited about. She wrote this decision that requires when you set bail for somebody, you must, as a judge, not can, you must. If you hold them or require bail and keep them, you have to ask whether they get the bail, right? And then there has to be some written findings. It just can't be sort of willy-nilly. Those judges have a memorandum that the judges received that basically writes out effective immediately what each judge has to do in every circuit.
Is that also the same one that has to take into account that if they are a woman, a custodial parent?
That was brought up by Andrea James, who's a wonderful, wonderful Northeastern Law School grad. That decision is not necessarily that, but that's another that is fantastic for primary caretakers, the vast majority of which are women, but there are men out there doing that as well, that there must be questions asked there with respect to that. So all of those are great new changes. The word is they were codified. Those two rulings, or the decision from the SJC and Andrea's excellent point that she made, were both placed into this new legislation. My point is that you need somebody who can take that law and draft policies and procedures. And this isn't the pretty sexy part of the job, but to make sure that every single assistant district attorney in that office, all 150 of them, are doing the same thing in every court. Because where we have problems is if it's not implemented in Roxbury District Court, but but in certain pockets, right, communities are getting access and benefits in this community, but not in this community. We need uniformity across the board. It comes with leadership and policies and procedures. So that's number one. I do believe, Tayla, that there is certainly some diversity in the DA's office, but at the top, there's not a lot at all, right? Like the district attorney has 5 people in the org chart with lines that directly report to him, all white male. Absolutely, all really good lawyers too.
But with one lens,
with one
story.
Homogenous, and maybe they can say no, I grew up in South Boston. I didn't grow up in West Roxbury or Dorchester. Okay, that's a different distinction, maybe. But what I want is
I'm Jewish. I'm not Catholic.
Well, or whatever, right? But I want women. I want people with different abilities. I want LGBTQ. I want people of different mindsets. We are better when we have different opinions coming in, or
bouncing
we can
off
say,
each other,
right, what is your policy on this? Well, have you thought following 52 things? And then you need somebody who can hear all of that and say, I'm not, thank you, Tayla, for that point. I'm going with ABC. You said XYZ. I appreciate you. I'm going to call you back to the table and listen to time as well, but I'm going this way. But those type of things immediately shift the culture in the office, right? And so not only with transparency, not only with creating a conviction integrity unit, which means people can that unit and say, I was falsely, the police planted evidence, or the DA's office didn't turn over evidence and committed what's called a Brady violation, right? All of which happens in secret. Prosecutors and we get to look at the file and decide, oh, we're going to turn this over, we're not going to turn this over. There's no independent review of what's going on there. So for me, with transparency comes, and that's where people ask us back, of an open file policy, right? So what I love about all these interviews, when you're meeting with other people, ask them, well, they have an open file policy. What does that mean? And what that means is defendants and their lawyers get the file way sooner than waiting until a couple weeks before trial, right? Because that wastes money. If I was taught in the federal system, and even some people in the DA's office in Brockton, great prosecutors that said to me, if win without turning my entire file over to the defense, I shouldn't be charging the case. Right? Like, what are we hiding? There are definitely instances, let's be clear, where there are victims that are, we don't want to be named. That don't need to be named. There will be redactions. It's not going to look like an FBI redaction where it's 50 pages and all you see is the word of, and it's all black on the rest of the page, and then the next you see the number 9 on page 52. No, you'll distinguish it, but there needs to be private information that's not passed along. But even with cooperating witnesses or confidential informants and those individuals, I'm a proponent of we need to meet our burden fast as the Commonwealth and the prosecution, because we are literally taking away people's liberties. People aren't free with this sort of hanging over their head. They are sitting in the Suffolk County House of Corrections, not found guilty, waiting for their day in court. So we need to be better.
Taking days off of work, unable to provide for their families.
Absolutely.
Losing their job.
And those are the collateral consequences of the charging decisions we make. Tayla, if you have children, I have a 14-year-old daughter, 2 nieces I take care of. If I'm late picking up one of those kids from daycare, it's almost like an Amber Alert, right? My phone is ringing. Where are you? Where are you? What are you doing? Can you imagine if somebody just took you and for 2 days you weren't able to call?
Yeah, that's called DCF. The Child Protective Services steps in.
Yeah, of course. You might, depending on where you work, you might lose your job, because if you don't have a job where you can call in later and say, I'm using sick days or whatever, just imagine the domino effect in your life, depending on what life you have.
Unfortunately, I don't have to imagine that, because I have cousins that have those lived experiences. And even though it's vicarious trauma, it's still trauma that the entire family feels. Are really coming to the top of the hour. One of my last questions is, recently, I believe it was Sacramento, California, their city attorney, I don't know if that is the equivalent of district attorney, but their city attorney just said anybody with a case, we're expunging everybody that ever had a weed case in the last 25 years. Yep. As district attorney, do you have that right? And is that something that you would consider?
So yes, we do have the right to do that. Seeing things like that in California, you're seeing things like that in Pennsylvania with Larry Krasner. You're seeing things like that in New York, where DAs are saying all these warrants that are out there, thousands of them, we're dismissing them all, right? And it's log jamming the system. We now have legalized recreational marijuana, right? So we have $1 billion industry in Massachusetts that the voters have said they want, not just medicinal, but recreational, where people are making good money off of marijuana. And we still have people, many of them black and brown, that are sitting in jail on some of these types of charges. So you bet. And what I like, you bet I will absolutely be doing affirmative things, not making people come to us. And if we do make people come to us, we are posting it everywhere. Like, it is not going to be hard.
It's not a secret.
It's not a secret, and it's not going to be hard. Or we can, even if we have the power, affirmatively say to people, we are going to expunge any charge of, misdemeanor X, Y, or Z. And that is really, really important that we do that. And one other last thing I will say, I know we're wrapping up, but I really want to, maybe next time or when you have people on here, the trauma that people are experiencing when crimes happen in their community, and getting better services for the survivors, right? So absolutely, you are dealing with the worst situation of your life if a loved one has been violently injured or killed. I'm speaking to people, Tayla, every day that tell me my son or my loved one was murdered. no services were provided to me, and I was told to dial 311 and then work through that automated system. Like, unacceptable, completely unacceptable. And then further, those same individuals are saying it's been 10 years since my loved one died, and no one's ever reached out to me from the detective's office or the DA's office. That has to change immediately. That is adding insult to injury. We are a service department. Tax dollars pay for this office, and we need to do better. And I would love the opportunity to get people's votes and be the person that does that.
So are you saying that if elected, you will create a service that currently is not?
Yeah, what I'm saying is I believe there are services that are available. It's too hard to get them. I'm in the process now, Tayla, of finding out what all those services are. And if I think there are better ones, you bet I'm going to be meeting with Mayor Walsh about that, 100%. And if I think there is a more streamlined way, I don't think people should have to pick up a phone and dial 311. I think that when there is a crime scene that happens, we know trauma is occurring right there in those, and we need to have services on the ground that evening offered to those individuals. I personally believe we need to do more before people even get in the system. That's a whole different show. But certainly when there is a body on the street, if we don't believe that's enough trauma, that we are now going to demand that family pick up a phone and dial 311 and work their way through a system, that's unacceptable. That's just, we can't have that happening.
Whew, that was a lot. I am Tayla Andre. We're waking up with Tayla Andre has nothing to do with the time of day that we link up. It's about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. I hope you're awake. I hope you woke up. I hope you're in your feeling. Definitely am. When are we going to vote?
You guys are all voting September 4th, and I would love your vote, and I'm going to ask for it, but even if not for me, you are voting. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Voting. September 4th, the Tuesday after Labor Day. Get
Get
involved.
out. Get out the vote. That was amazing.